What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time, and if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. Striving for progress and not striving for perfection. This is something that, when it comes to a lot of things in life, but I'm going to use training as a training and as dads, when we are trying to prioritize our health, we are trying to potentially reclaim our overall health and well-being, and striving for progress and not perfection. It is an old saying that has been around for eons. It is not something that I've made up, but it is something that really, really rings true when you move into a stage of your life where training is more about training for health rather than training for performance, because nothing is ever going to be perfect. And I had a conversation with one of our clients a couple of days ago where we were talking about them building consistency within their training. And this gentleman that I was talking to, he's struggling to find consistency because he runs his own business. He's got kids, he's got a family, and there always seems to be something come up. And we talked about planning because obviously we know that's important. We spoke about making sure that he's prioritizing the time for himself. But what he's finding is he does the plan, and some weeks it hits. Some weeks it goes off without a hitch. He's able to get his 3 sessions in. He's able to do the other stuff that he needs to do, and he's just able to, tick those boxes on that week on. But other weeks it doesn't. He's got to stay back at work because he's got a few too many jobs on. One of the kids gets sick. The wife gets sick, so he's got to pick up a little bit of the slack at home. All stuff that I'm sure most of us that are listening to this go through on probably at least once a month. So then we started to talk about what his goals were, right? Like what he's trying to get out of training. And it came back to, I just want to prioritize my health. I want to make this a habit. I want this to be something that fits into my life, so that then he can hit his secondary goals of, feeling better about himself, looking better, becoming stronger, all those other things. Because if you've been listening to this podcast, you know the number one thing, or if you've listened to any of the other content that I've put out, whether it be through the Unstoppable Dad Project or it be through Fusion Sports and Performance, one thing that I just harp on about over and over again is just building consistency. And it got me thinking about that, and it got me thinking about that building consistency. And sometimes what we need to do is we actually move the scale that we're measuring that consistency out on. Because when I started to dig down during this conversation and we started to talk about it, it's like he'll do 3 one week, and then he might have the opportunity to do 2 the next, but he kind of throws it out because he can't do his 3. And then he'll do his 3, and then maybe he can do 1, but he doesn't even do the 1. Then he starts to get down on himself, and the next week where maybe he could do 3, he's in this spiral where he just doesn't feel like doing it. He's demotivated. He doesn't feel disciplined, and because he missed it last week, he's kind of giving himself permission to get out of it this week. And then he takes a second week off, and then he kind of gets a little bit of a wind, and then he's back. And that's not consistency. You're being consistent at being inconsistent at that point. So then what we spoke about is, all right, if we looked at things over a 6-month period, right? And we looked at, because there's going to be months where everything's going to click and you're going to be able to do 4 weeks in a row where you're going to be able to hit your session goals. And there's going to be months like where he's going through right now, where maybe only half the month you're able to hit your session goals. But then the other couple of days, the other couple of weeks, you're only able to hit 1 or 2. And I don't think I'm saying this out of turn, but obviously 1's better than none, 2's better than 1, 3's better than 2. And sometimes we just need to do what we can, because there's going to be external circumstances that are outside of our control that are going to stop us from hitting our goals. And looking at getting that progress over a longer period of time especially when it comes to being a dad and you've made that shift mentally that now I'm trying to implement this as a lifestyle choice rather than trying to bench press more or squat more or be single digit body fat percentage. Like, this is becoming a lifestyle choice, a health choice for me to be a more functional human being, parent, father. And I've made that shift, and then looking at that progress over a 6 month, 12-month period rather than just a week to week or a month to month thing. Because then when we started to talk about it and we started to dig down on it, there was weeks where, he could have applied himself and he didn't, but because there was some stuff outside of his control the week before, he just kind of threw 2 weeks out. And then when we started talking about, hey, like, you do what you can when you can. And then we really talked about it. And we looked back over his last 3 months and we've gone, right, like, if we really sat down and we looked at these weeks that you didn't come in, let's think about the weeks that you could have got something done. And he's like, oh, I could have got 2 done here. Realistically, that week I could have done 3. It was just would have been a little bit outside of my plan. So we have to be adaptable and we have to be moved. And when we sat down and we talked about it, if he was focusing on a larger scale and he was focusing on progress over a larger scale, he probably would have been able to build up that consistency. Instead, what he was striving for was perfection every week. And while planning is such an important part in the early stages when you are trying to make a change, having a plan which is too rigid can be a massive downfall and can actually cause the opposite end of the spectrum than what you are trying to achieve by doing the plan in the first place. So looking at that over a longer term and aiming for progress over that long term rather than perfection week in, week out, and rather than just having and sticking to the plan. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be times where you're not going to want to do it. I've spoken about this with a lot of different people and I've spoken about this on this podcast. In all reality, when it comes to training, there is a lot of the time I am probably I'm not motivated to train more than I am motivated to train. You just have to rely on that discipline to follow through with it. So there is going to be weeks where maybe you don't feel like doing it, but you've just got to go and do it. One thing I can say is all those times that I haven't felt like going and doing something physical, whether it is a session here in the gym or whether it is a jiu-jitsu session, I can tell you right now, the times I've made myself do it, I've felt better for it afterwards. And it's been very rare over the last decade that I've spoken to someone who has been like, I really didn't feel like coming today, and then by the end of it, they don't feel better for themselves because they've pushed through that adversity and they've moved forward. But I digress. Going back to striving for progress and not perfection, with that plan, for some of us, you're going to be able to stick to it meticulously. For a lot of us, you're not going to be able to. And what we have to look at is, firstly, what our goal is. So if our goal is, this is a health choice, this isn't this is something that I want to do for my lifestyle, that I want to do for myself so that I can be more functional, more fit, stronger, insert the adjective of what you want to be from the habit that you're trying to implement. But I want to do that long term. But I'm so focused on being perfect week in, week out, when the reality is life, circumstances, job, business, insert whatever it is here as to a reason why you are unable to stick to it is going to happen. And I'm constantly focused on being perfect and I'm not just focused on moving the needle forward when I can. That's going to eventually work in the opposite direction and not let you get that progress that you are trying to get, because it's not going to be perfect all the time. In fact, for a lot of us, when we do have kids and we do have a family that we've got to worry about, we've got to provide for, very, very rarely are we going to get a perfect set of circumstances. So while planning is important, being adaptable with that plan is also important. But focusing on things on the long term and just focusing for that long term progress rather than that short term perfection is one real way to make sure that you're just going to consistently keep showing up when you can, because all too often we get caught up in trying to be perfect and telling ourselves that if we don't hit the plan 100% of the time that it's our fault. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. So striving for progress rather than striving for perfection can sometimes be a mindset shift that needs to be made in order for us to implement something into our life which is going to enhance us, which is going to take us to that next level. And it happens all too often with dads where we're almost trying to implement something that we were able to do in a previous life. Like, I talk to people all the time, and it's like, I want to be able to do something I was able to do before kids. It's not fair on yourself. It's not fair on your current self to compare yourself to your previous self. Can you be a better version of that? Absolutely. But trying to be that level of perfection when you didn't have the same set of circumstances to deal with can be a pitfall. And it's the same as aiming for perfection each week. Should you aim for perfection? Absolutely. Should you get down on yourself if it doesn't happen? No. You need to be adaptable, and you need to be able to adjust on the fly. And there's going to be weeks where it's not all going to fall into place. So what does progress look like to you? What are you looking to achieve when you're trying to implement something? If it is a health change, if it is a training regime, and you are trying to do it to try and up your own health and up your own level, and we're not training for something extremely specific, it needs to be in a sustainable way, but you also need to strive for that progress, and that progress over a long period of time, because progress will happen when you're consistent. And if you strive to be perfect, but don't be too hard on yourself if you're not, but you just strive to constantly show up when you can, you are going to be more likely to get results over the long term. Whereas if you just keep putting roadblocks in front of yourself because you can't get to a particular point, it may be something, and it may be a spiral that it sends you down that is too hard to get out of. And that thing that you're trying to implement is not going to be sustainable. You are not going to be able to implement it. So strive for progress, not for perfection. It does depend on your goals. It does depend on what you want to achieve. But sometimes that mindset shift for a lot of people, when we have shifted our focus from really superficial goals to the overall goal of being a more capable husband, father, human being, it really needs to be about progress and not about perfection at that point, because not everything's going to go perfect every single week. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully you get something out of it. We all ebb and flow through motivation. We all ebb and flow through times when it's not good all the time. So don't think just because you see somebody on social media that looks like they're motivated to train all the time and looks like, they're able to do all their sessions and hit their plan week in, week out, that it's always like that for them, because I will tell you right now, there is a better than average chance that it never is, and it won't be for you either. So strive for progress, not perfection. Try and just keep moving forward. Do what you can when you can, but most importantly, do something. Thanks for that. Like, share, and subscribe to this on the podcast platforms on YouTube. Follow us, The Unstoppable Dad Project, on Facebook, or at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.